Hello and welcome to the Alastair Generationally Speaking podcast, where we look at bridging the generation gap by debunking myths, tackling stereotypes and sharing practical tips on how we can build stronger intergenerational connections. My guest today is co-founder of Gen Z Coach, or is it Gen Z Coach? We'll find out in a minute. It's a consultancy that helps forward-thinking organisations become future fit by maximising the potential of their Gen Z workforce. It's an absolute pleasure today to talk to Patrick Quinton-Smith. Hi, Patrick.
Hi, Alastair. Pleasure to be here and chat with you also.
And is it Gen Z or Gen Z? Which camp are you in?
Well, it's the American or the English. We kind of alternate between the two, to be honest. Gen Z, Gen Z. I just use them interchangeably. What do you say?
I interchange as well, to be honest with you. I think it varies on my audience and where I am and so on. Because actually some people aren't too keen, probably predominantly older people aren't too keen on what they perceive as Americanisms.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I hear that.
But I'm pretty relaxed about it. But so you're Gen Z or Gen Z?
Yeah, I'm on the cusp. I mean, the definitions of Gen Z vary a little bit. But I'm born in 1996. Yeah. I could call myself a zillennial in a sense. So I feel like I've lived both worlds. I'm the youngest of 5 siblings, and they're all millennials. So I've kind of grown up in a millennial household, so to speak. But my friends are Gen Z. So yeah, I've been able to see both worlds, which I think benefits the work that I did.
Yeah, completely. And actually, it's interesting that you being the youngest of 5 siblings. I mean, yes, wow, that is quite something, because that will frame the way you think by itself. And of course, as you said, they're all older than you, and if you are around older people, as you know, that will have an impact on your thinking as well. So, do you identify as both then, effectively? Do you?
It's funny saying you identify, but I would identify as Gen Z because that's how the environment I've grown up in with my friends. But yeah, I'm not sure I would define myself as either. I would say, it's an interesting question because it's interesting because a lot of people who aren't Gen Z, I know a lot of Gen Xers who said they identify as Gen Z because it's almost like like a way. It's a set. It could be classed as a set of values and a way of thinking, in a way. So
I think to a certain degree, but I think that the challenge you are the generation you are purely because of the environment you were brought up in. You were brought up in a different age technologically, attitude, and everything else. So exactly. Yes, you might like the attributes of a Gen Z, but actually you are going to be framed by your generation of when you were born, exactly. On the whole. But actually you've also broken the mold in that you're a Gen Z and millennials are on the whole having many of those big decisions in life are coming later, like getting married, having children, settling down. But you've just got married. So first of all, congratulations on that.
Thanks
but again, I can imagine there aren't that many of your cohort who are getting married. They're leaving it till later. Or is that maybe another myth?
It's interesting. Yeah. I mean, a lot of my friends, well, actually from my friends from school, my friends from primary school and some friends from secondary school, that circle, a lot have got married, which is interesting, particularly from my primary school, which is, it's strange, but certain other circles, it's less common. My sister's friend, she's 3 years older than me. Very few got married. So it's definitely, interesting to see those shifts.
Well, it's like everything else. As you know, my mantra is we're framed by a generation, not defined by it. So, it just shows we shouldn't just, believe the patterns that we read. And so for you, being the youngest of the siblings and the environment in which you were brought up in, was it a fairly traditional household, or was it what we would recognise as a Gen Z household?
Well, actually, my dad's a fairly old boomer, because in a sense, it's fairly old boomer. But he's 72. So I feel like I've grown up with quite a traditional, sort of parenting. I guess I was raised as a millennial in a sense, because of some of his values around work ethic. He runs his own business. So I feel like some of the the principles of leadership, which we see in business today, were kind of instilled in me. So that's why I feel like it's interesting, because I feel like I really get the mindset out of a lot of leaders in the workplace. But I also understand the mindset and values of digital natives, my generation, because that's how I've grown up. So I can really see where the conflicts arise because of that, because the mindsets are incredibly different. So yeah, but I'd say it's pretty traditional, apart from the fact I've got 4 of the siblings. So the household was pretty crazy. If everyone's got 2 friends over, then there's suddenly 10 kids in the house, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I can just imagine. But that's really interesting how that frames you, having an older father, because, yes, brilliant in the work that you do. So give me, because obviously you're still, relatively young, certainly compared to people like myself. So, but yet you've already started your own business and things. Give us a very quick trajectory of how you got to the point you're at now to be running your own Gen Z coaching business.
Yeah, I think the first thing, seed was planted just from a very early age of my dad running his own business. So I think that was always something that was on my mind, seeing that it was possible. So I've always wanted to have my own business, and I've been incredibly interested in business and essentially creating a reality in a life that you really want. I've always been interested in psychology. So that's kind of, I knew it was always on the cards for me in my future. I was always just waiting for the right thing. I always thought it'd be a product. The new Facebook or something like that. I never thought it would be a service in a sense, or consultancy. But I will start when I studied business economics at university. I ran a events business there, so I'd been involved in businesses, kind of growing up. And then when I started Bulb Energy, which is it was the fastest growing startup in Europe at the time, as an energy supplier, now owned by Octopus. I joined there, and I was really struggling early in my career. I had really bad mental health, didn't know where I wanted to go in my career. I felt really stuck, lost and confused. But what happened is I had a coach that really changed my whole mindset. So I was going to quit my job, but the coach helped me really see a pathway. Cutting a long story short, that coach helped me stay in the business another 3.5 years. It led to me getting about seven promotions in that time. Became a manager, and then I realized I really went through a transformation, helped me overcome all the barriers I was facing. And I realized this is an incredible skill. And this person helped me to do this just through this talking to me. I was like, I need to learn this skill to help other young people that I was leading in the teams to overcome challenges that I observed them dealing with the same challenges I faced. So I learned to coach with the International Coaching Federation, got my qualifications, and used that whilst I was in the business, and that kind of led to a lot of the success that I had. But it became so clear to me that young people needed this. And the organization that I was in and others were also struggling with the same challenges that young people faced. And I just realized that there was a massive gap and opportunity. And I was just getting so many signals and feedback from people I was speaking to that organizations needed support with this. And I really felt driven to do it, given my challenges starting my career, but also my passion for leadership and business. So yeah, it got to a point where I decided to quit my job and just go for it. I thought, life's too short. I'm 26. Let's go for it. It's now or never. and it's worked out. It's not been that as challenges, but it's worked out.
I'd like to go back, if I may, to you talking about being with Bulb and having a coach. Was that coach provided for by the company?
It wasn't provided. They paid for it through my request. So I found a coach myself because I was really struggling, didn't know what to do. I said I'm just going to go travel to India and find myself again and work it all out. But my brother, who's the oldest of my siblings, was a bit concerned and said, maybe you should try not to go to India. And he pointed me in the direction of a coach, and I found one who was amazing. But the business paid for it.
So you went to the business and said, I want to stay in the business, but I'm not sure whether I can. So if you pay for a coach, then actually you're going to get more out of me.
Exactly. And I was, fortunate. I think they saw potential in me. I think they wanted me to stay. And
and that's really forward thinking. That's so, and it's something you'd expect maybe from a startup, but also maybe from some of the established companies and organizations doing that kind of stuff. Because I did a recent piece of work working out that if a 1,000 employee company kept their staff for just 6 more months, they'd wind up saving £800,000 a year. So actually, if you start employing coaches or start helping people, use coaches and paying for it, actually it's going to be a darn sight cheaper than losing staff. So that's a wonderful forward-thinking move on their part, which other organisations should probably take notice of.
Well, exactly. I mean, this is a big part of the work that we do at Gen Z Coach as well. It's really helping organizations see the costs of losing people and retention costs, and trying to help them. It's not just about the retention, but it's also the engagement piece as well. And it's like I had a rocket up my backside after I had that coaching. It wasn't just that I stayed; I was so motivated. So it was really an amazing investment for them, to be honest, because it didn't cost that much in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, no, I think that's wonderfully forward thinking, and I think it's also something that is possibly systematic of a successful business today, that they're investing in that way in their people. And it's quite interesting, isn't it, when you look at organizations today, this whole concept, and we're going to focus particularly on Gen Z, but also the way Gen Z are interacting with other generations at work. And I'd be really interested in how you do that work, because it's something that can make a big difference to the organization and to the individual, and most of all, as you said, that engagement piece. I mean, Gallup did that amazing piece of work last year all about the amount that people are engaged or the lack of engagement. So first of all, in terms of your business, how do people find you? What's the process that normally people think, hang on a second, we need help? How do they recognize that?
How do they recognize it? It's a really interesting question. I mean, to be honest, a lot of the businesses, they're either being reactive and they've got retention issues, or they've got engagement issues and it's, productivity is low. And therefore they go, okay, well, we've had to speak to it's come from the top, from the board, we need to do something about this. Some organizations we work with consider stop employing their early careers. And some large organizations. So they go, well, we need to consciously address this. And at that point, that's when they reach out to us. And actually about 90% of the work we do initially is working with senior leaders or people who aren't Gen Z to understand Gen Z. So it's helping them understand who they really are and moving away from assumptions, moving away from myths, and how they can really improve their strategy and the behaviors to making it a more multi-generational company that supports young people to creating that environment where they can thrive and want to stay. So it's either reactive, or in many organizations we work with, they recognize where the world is going. They recognize the challenges or differences of digitally native generations and want to get ahead of it, because the gaps in generations are only getting wider as the rate of technology increases, and young people are continuing to use that technology before their prefrontal cortex is developed. So they want to get ahead of it because this problem's not going away. The gap's only getting wider.
And actually that brings up very neatly the topic of AI, which, let's be honest, everybody is struggling with. There's very few people who are completely comfortable. But I think it's possibly affecting Gen Z more than any other generation because of expectation, because of the graduate workplace, and because of the fact that they've just come out of university where the chances are they haven't really used AI because they've got lecturers who aren't using it themselves, perhaps. So how do you deal with that whole AI issue, and what are you finding when you're working with organizations?
It's interesting. The AI hasn't actually been an issue with the companies that we've worked with. I guess it's a concern when looking at the future of work and, where it's going in terms of automation. But I don't think it's quite there yet with and I know that Deloitte, or was it PwC, they've cut 200 jobs recently. So for some organizations, automation is meaning that they are reducing the amount of young people that they hire. But I think it is going to get worse. But I think in terms of the people in the organization, young people in the organization, it hasn't seen any major challenges. What's your view on that and the challenges with AI in the workplace at the moment?
I think they're going to have a very big partnership between Gen Z and the organisation, and I think there needs to be an awful lot of honesty as well, because I think a lot of Gen Z probably aren't going to front up with the fact that they do not know much about AI and they want help with AI. And I think if organizations invest in training their graduates and their Gen Z cohort in AI, and there's an open conversation about it, I think that can actually be a massive benefit. But there needs to be that honest conversation, and I can imagine in many respects it's being dodged. And actually, it brings me neatly to my next point that I bang on a lot about in my work, about the onboarding and the recruitment process being joined up. Because a lot of large organizations, particularly, you have one function who do the recruitment, another function who are doing the onboarding. And when Gen Z gets to the onboarding process and they find that actually everything that was discussed in the recruitment process isn't actually exactly as they thought it was going to be, that's an immediate start to a problem.
Yeah, 100%. It's such a massive challenge, and this really grinds, out my generation's gears, because transparency and authenticity is a core value of our generation. So when we've been sold a pipe dream and we turn out it's not what it is, then we totally lose trust in the organization, but straight away. So it is the worst. It's one of the worst things that an organization can do to build that trust and therefore get results from this generation. So that's one of the things that organizations come in when the young people come in and go, God, he's lazy son of a, why are they so disengaged? But actually they haven't realized that they've just made a rod for their own back by, as you said, having disparate recruitment and onboarding teams. So it's a big challenge.
And also quite often unrealistic expectations from their teams as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, expectations, that's one of the main things that we speak to organizations about is aligning on expectations. And it's not just about what the role is, but actually what the expectations are in the workplace, because young people growing up, starting the workplace during COVID, growing up as digital natives, as different values, their expectations, what they want from work is totally different. So that conversation has to be had. So expectations is so important.
What are the other major issues that you find yourself having to deal with when you go and work with organizations to bridge that generation gap? What are some of the other things that you're discovering or they're asking for help with?
I think that I touched on it earlier, but the first bit is really that shifting the mindsets of leaders, helping them overcome their own assumptions and biases. One of the best things we do with executives and partners of large organizations is just asking them, what are the assumptions that people have about Gen Z in society? We ask it what the societal assumptions, so they can kind of share, depersonalize it. But then we help them understand that, okay, well, if we have these assumptions, how are we likely to communicate? Are we likely to communicate in a way that empowers or a way that disempowers? And it's almost like a triangle of our beliefs impact our communication, and our communication directly impacts the performance of the people that we're leading. And then that performance will then reinforce the beliefs or the assumptions that we have. So if we're believing that Gen Z are lazy, how are we likely to communicate with them? We're likely to be a bit more dismissive, maybe not give them opportunities. We don't think they'll take it on. That leads to them being disengaged, not feeling empowered. So they're likely to maybe do a substandard piece of work, or more likely to leave earlier as well, and therefore reinforces those beliefs. So we help them understand that their beliefs directly impact the performance of younger people, and and then help them, work on really educating just who this generation is to build empathy. One of the core things about the work we do is building generation intelligence. I think I've talked about this term with you, but we deem it as the skill set of being able to understand, empathize, and communicate across all generations. And a big part of that understanding and empathy is just, a lot of the work that you do and we do around educating. So that's honestly one of the biggest bits. But then opening up two-way dialogue and reverse feedback, and I won't go into all that now, but there's a lot that goes into it.
And what advice do you give to Gen Z themselves? So, you're working with the C-suite a lot, getting them to see Gen Z in a different way, but there's also work for Gen Z to do. So how do you help them to, be more prepared and more proactive in the workplace? Yeah,
I think one of the things that we hear the most is about resilience. And you would have seen PwC news this week that they have invested loads in resilience training for their early careers. So helping them, and a big part of that resilience is being able to receive feedback and being able to really realize that feedback is a gift and it's not personal, and it's something that if you want to improve and you want to grow, that is the only way. You've got to try, you've got to fail, make mistakes, and be open to receiving that and developing that growth mindset. I think it's one of the most, for me personally as well, that was one of the biggest things my coach helped me with, is to really develop a growth mindset and to not take feedback personally, because across all organizations, feedback can really knock young people, because they take it so personally. Growing up with social media, having maybe a deeper sense of insecurity about themselves, not feeling they're good enough, feeling they're behind. So it's just helping them understand why they might lack some resilience, and then really how to overcome it. So that's one of the main things.
And what about the relationship between the employer and employee? How have you seen that evolve, and how are you helping them to shift that into a different way of working? Yeah,
so I think another thing we really talk about is that just open dialogue and reverse feedback. Being able to help leaders to just ask the people that they're leading to get feedback on how they're leading is just such an important piece of what we do. So you can do that, they can do that themselves, but it's also young people to learn how to give feedback upwards as well, just have that dialogue and understand how you want to work with each other. So that, I think the whole thing that we've seen through this work is just that understanding of each other and each generation, so that they can just communicate more openly, being able to resolve conflicts. Because a lot of the problems that we see is because there's a lack of communication on both sides. And so conflicts really escalate and they can lead to tribunals in many instances. So it's really a two-way street of young people. They've got to be able to express themselves confidently and say what they need or say what they have challenges with. But also, being able to, it's just creating those spaces and really encouraging people to do that. So that just cohesiveness, I would say, is like the first thing that we see.
What's the toughest part of your job when it's bridging that gap? What's the biggest area, the biggest hill you have to climb, should I say?
Biggest hill we'd have to climb, I would actually say, is with a lot of leaders who, some are very resistant to the idea of changing their mindset towards young people, being more open to new ways of being towards younger people. I think there's a lot of objections when it comes to this work. Like, why should we have to coddle this generation? Why should we have to change ourselves? Isn't this whole conversation, just a bit of fluff? Haven't there always been generational differences? So like, why is this such a big deal now? Like, surely they just need to, grow a bit of resilience and, not be so entitled. Those are a lot of the objections that we kind of hear. So I think, but that's the kind of conversations that we really love and thrive on. So those are the most common challenges and blockers, I would say, is helping those, shifting those mindsets to those leaders. But once that happens, it creates quite a lot of shifts. And then for younger, go on.
I was going to say, and what's emerging? Well, actually, no. Finish with the younger. Well, what's the most difficult nut to crack when it comes to the younger generation?
Again, it's helping them. It comes back to helping them understand the other generations and how they were raised as well, and it's that coming together. I think something that always stands out is leaving at 5 o'clock, leaving on the dot, because there's the beliefs from previous other generations that, like, to show commitment, you have to stay late. But that's not how younger people view it. So they see it as having work-life balance and viewing, work as a marathon, not a sprint, having boundaries. So it's helping them understand that actually it's a kind of a choice. If you, in this environment, if you would like to get ahead, then staying late kind of goes a long way, and helping them understand the importance of teamwork in a work environment. And kind of focusing more on what they can give rather than that mindset of what they can get. Because I do see that, there's a bit of a mindset of almost forgetting sometimes that you're paid to do the job. And there's a bit of a mindset of expecting a lot more. So I think that's just some brutal honesty, which I think really lands coming from, myself and my co-founder and people in our team, because we are of that generation, just to say, look, expect less from the world and expect more from yourself, and to really, give. And that it's a value exchange, and it's almost asking yourself, well, what value are you giving?
Yes, you're absolutely right. It's completely about a value exchange, and it's also about that relationship. And the one thing that we know Gen Z crave are good relationships. So if there's that positive relationship between a boss and their team member, then the chances are they'll want to work with them. They'll want to do the job because they've got that positive relationship. And, to me, if you focus on the relationship, actually everything else slots into place, because you've got that trust, and that needs to be established from the very first moment, in that onboarding week. I just want to finish up with a little bit of a future thing. You're seeing newer people coming into the workforce, people who've been around a while. Hopefully they're starting to get that this generation are here to stay, that actually there's going to have to be some give and take, and that you have to appreciate that change has taken place. And it's been quite a seismic shift in many respects. What are some of the trends that you're seeing coming in terms of maybe challenges that are going to exist between generations in the workplace in the next few years? Is there anything that you can see on the horizon there?
Any additional challenges in the next few years?
Or maybe how the challenge might evolve from where it is now?
I mean, it does come back to that question you said about AI, actually. That will be really interesting to see how early career roles evolve as some of the, I call them more mundane admin tasks, as they, maybe eradicated. Like, how are those roles going to evolve? And I also think something I was talking to my co-founder about, something that I do think needs to change is moving from a time-based value system to a more meritocratic value-based system, because there's so much presenteeism in the workplace at the moment, and valuing people and judging their value by how much time they're spending in the office or at work. But that is just something that really does not resonate with young people. They want to work smart. They don't want to just do work for the sake of it when they feel like there's better ways of doing it, or more efficient ways of doing it. So that is a whole, future of work conversation around, like, how is work valued? And I think particularly as there's a lot of hybrid working, that's something I really see that becoming more of an issue, because I think a lot of young people are getting disenfranchised with just having to, there's so much, working from home, scrolling your finger on your mouse to show that you're around. And that's not valuable for a business. And that doesn't make young people feel good, because they want to add value. So that's something I'm really intrigued to see how organizations really evolve and to make,
Well, I have a phrase for that, which is, because I'm a great believer in people spending more time, especially younger people spending more time in the office, but on their terms. And the phrase I use is create FOMO to combat HOGO. So in other words, if you create an environment at work where young people want to be in, and they do, the default is they want to be there. The challenge is that when they get there, their millennial and Gen X bosses aren't there, and they're doing Zoom calls from the office, and they become extremely disillusioned with that. And then if you can create that right atmosphere with the right relationship building, they then form relationships in the workplace. They're far more likely to stay and be invested in what they do because they recognize they're part of a team. But it's very difficult to feel that if you're working from home. And of course, the one thing we know about young people coming into workplace, often they don't know what they don't know. So creating that right environment. But I think mandating is very difficult. And, to your point about the workplace, I think the reality is the workplace will have to go through more change. I think we're still in the aftershocks of COVID-19. Yeah. We're still trying to find that level of what's right and what's not. And I think rather than doing a hybrid of what was happening in COVID and what happened before, is actually, as you said, creating that new way of working.
Yeah. No, I'm so with you about young people being in the office. You have to be able to be around people that you can learn from and build those relationships. As you said, people, they want great relationships, and it's so hard to do that when you're doing it virtually and you can't read people's body language properly. It's how we've evolved. So I'm so with you on that. And that's something we really do encourage a lot of our clients to really make sure that they're in the office as well. And if you are young people asking them to come in, they have to be there, and there's time for mentorship, and there's time for feedback, or there's training sessions, and making it. I like the phrase that you use. Yeah, it's creating FOMO and giving them a reason to want to come in. It's really important.
And, I knew when you were going to be a guest on my podcast, I knew that we were going to agree on so much because obviously we're in a similar space. But you've given me some interesting perspectives, and also some perspectives from a Gen Z, which is always very, very welcome. And it's just great to hear those perspectives. So, Patrick, thanks so much. I wish you all the best with your work, with your team, and keep up the good work. And together we will spread that word of the positivity that Gen Z can bring the workplace, if only everybody gets around the table, has that conversation and builds that relationships.
Amen to that.
What a great way to finish.
It was great to be on your podcast, Alastair. Thanks for having me, and it's great to chat as always.
Absolute pleasure. I know we'll be having lots more conversations in the future. For the moment, Patrick, thank you so much indeed for being my guest. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. And don't forget, we'll be back in 2 weeks' time with another podcast. Bye for now. The Alastair Greener Generationally Speaking podcast was presented by me, Alastair Greener. It was recorded at Granary Studios and produced by James Jones. Please follow us and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. To find out more, visit generationallyspeaking.co.uk.